viewers, I am Professor Namita Rajput, Professor in Department of Commerce, Sri Aurobindo College, University of Delhi. In the ongoing series of corporate governance, we will be talking more on the corporate models. So, the German model of corporate governance is a two-tier system in which there is a distinct advantage of two types of boards. The German model is characterized by a mandatory two-tier board system. One is the management board and another is the supervisory board. Management board is responsible for day-to-day activities, whereas the supervisory board is responsible for overseeing and monitoring the management board activities. Now, it has certain advantages that it has a two-tier structure, it has a concentrated ownership, the role of the banks is substantial, and the stakeholder orientation is there. That is, the German model places a strong emphasis on the interest of all the stakeholders, including the shareholders, employees, customers, suppliers, and a broader community. And also, there is a regulatory framework in which the corporate governance in Germany is regulated by a combination of the statutory laws and the voluntary codes. Now, basically, it has a focus on the long-term success, and the involvement of the various stakeholders in the decision-making process is very thought to contribute to a more sustainable approach to managing the company. Now, the German model of corporate governance has both been praised and criticized on the different perspectives. So, let's see about the particular advantages. That is a clear allocation of responsibility. There is an enhanced executive director liability. There is a flexible supervisory panel, the modern and the transparent system. The adopting the German model could potentially move the corporate governance towards a more modern and transparent system of the corporate governance. There is an efficient management for the private equity. Now, let's see what are the particular disadvantages of the German model of corporate governance. The first and the foremost disadvantage is a fragmented regulations. The body of law regulating the German model is fragmented, poorly drafted, and lacks a strong case law support, requiring a significant time and effort from the professional advisors and the clients to ensure the compliance and fill the regulatory gaps. The next is your lack of effective monitoring. The German model emphasizes on the insider control and the limited external market control mechanisms may lead to a managerial slack, as the lack of effective monitoring by outsiders could impact the corporate governance effectiveness. The next disadvantage when you talk about a German model of corporate governance is the discouragement of takeovers. The German model discouragement of hostile takeovers through the voting right limitations and the employee representatives on the supervisory board may hinder the market competitiveness and limit the managerial accountability. Now, these advantages and disadvantages what we have discussed, they shed light on the intricacies of the German model of the corporate governance, showcasing its strength in clarity and accountability, while also highlighting certain potential challenges which are relating to the regulation, monitoring, and the market dynamics. Let's move on to our next model of corporate governance. Yes, we are talking about the Japanese model. The Japanese model of the corporate governance is distinguished by several unique features that differentiate it from the Western models like the American and the European system. Let's see what are the characteristics of the Japanese model. The first and the foremost is a cross-shareholding. The Japanese corporations, they often engage in the cross-shareholding where the companies hold the stakes in each other. Now, this practice strengthens the business alliance and reduces the risk of holistic takeovers, fostering a long-term relationship over the short-term gains. The next is your main bank system. Now, in this system, one bank has a significant relationship with a company, providing not just financing but also the financial advice and the crisis management. Now, this main bank acts as a monitor and sometimes intervenes in the company's management to ensure the stability and the long-term growth. Now, there is another feature of the Japanese model which is called as kairetsu. Now, this refers to a group of enterprises with interlocking business relationship and the shareholdings. Now, this kairetsu can be horizontal, linking the companies from the various industries, or vertical, linking the manufacturers and the suppliers and the distributors. So, this system promotes the loyalty, cooperation and the stability within the group. The next important feature of the Japanese model of corporate governance is a lifetime employment. Although becoming less prevalent today, the practices of a lifetime employment has been a key feature of the Japanese model. The employees are hired straight out of the school and is expected to stay with the same company until retirement. Now, this fosters the loyalty and the collective mindset with a focus on training and developing the employees for a longer term. Next is your seniority-based wage and promotion systems. So, traditionally, the wages and the promotions in the Japanese companies have been based on seniority rather than performance. So, this model supports the lifetime employment models, ensuring the job security, but potentially limiting the individual initiative and innovation. The next important point relating to the Japanese model is a consensus-based decision making. The Japanese corporate governance model emphasizes the consensus and the collective decision making, often involving extensive consultations and the meetings. Now, this approach seeks to ensure a harmony and reduce the conflict within the organization, though it can sometimes lead to a slower decision-making process. The next is your limited role of the outside directors. Historically, the Japanese board, they have a fewer outside directors compared to their counterparts in the United States and the Europe. Now, this is changing gradually with the recent governance reforms, which are aimed at enhancing the transparency and accountability, but the influence of the internal management remains very strong. The next key feature of the Japanese corporate governance model is government-business relations. The Japanese government has historically played a significant role in the economy, including the direct involvement in certain industries and indirect influence through regulation and the policies. So, this close relationship between the government and the business has actually shaped the corporate governance practices. The Corporate Governance Code, introduced in 2015 and revised since the Japanese Corporate Governance Code, aims to improve the transparency, enhance the board functions, and boost the shareholder rights. The code encourages the companies to adopt the best practices in the governance through the compliance is not mandatory. So, these features, what we have talked about as far as the Japanese model of the corporate governance is concerned, is actually the environment that prioritizes the stability, long-term relationships and the harmony, contrasting with a more market-driven and the shareholder-focused model seen in the US and the Europe. However, the globalization and domestic challenges are driving the gradual changes in the Japanese corporate governance, including a greater emphasis on the shareholder value, more outside directors, and shift away from a lifetime employment and the seniority-based systems. The Japanese model of the corporate governance presents a distinct set of advantages and the disadvantages as outlined in the following sources. So, let's talk about the advantages of the Japanese model. The first and the foremost advantage of the Japanese model of the corporate governance is a stable profitability and the long-term sustainability. The Japanese model, they prioritize a stable profitability in the long run over a rapid growth, fostering a sustainable prospects for the organizations and the individuals involved. Now, this approach leads to a long-term value creation and the non-financial benefits from working within the group structures. The next advantage of the Japanese model is a strong stakeholder involvement. The model emphasizes the loyalty, stability, and active involvement of the employees in the organizational process, creating a sense of identification with the organization and fostering a culture of commitment and the long-term relationships. The next advantage is a high capital mobility and sustainable prospects. Despite being closed to the foreign investments, the Japanese economy exhibits a high capital mobility within the economy, enabling the creation of a long-term sustainable prospects for both individuals as well as the organizations. Now, there are some unique governance mechanisms which are related to the Japanese model of corporate governance. So, let's have a look on this. The Japanese model, they feature a unique governance mechanism where the financial institutions, they play a very critical, crucial, important role in appointing the board of directors and the president, ensuring a very structured approach to the governance with a strong relationship between the top management and the Keiretsu's network. Let's see what are the particular disadvantages relating to the Japanese model of the corporate governance. The first is your limited foreign investments. The low level of foreign investments in the Japanese model may restrict the opportunities for the international capital inflow, potentially limited the diversification and the global competitiveness. The next is your weak connection between the market value and the material incentives. The model creates a weak link between a market value of organization and high-level material incentives, affecting a bonus systems for the directors based on the dividend fluctuations. The next is your market perception and the integration challenges. The closed corporate culture in Japan may pose certain challenges for integrating the foreign investments and adopting the principles from other governance models, potentially hindering the market competitiveness and the innovation. The next is your slow monitoring and the equal treatment issues. The Japanese corporate governance systems, while concentrating the incentives towards the company's interest, may suffer from slow monitoring process and waste due to equal treatment practices, leading to inefficiencies in the governance mechanisms. Now, these advantages and the disadvantages, what we have discussed, they provide us with a very comprehensive overview of a unique characteristics, strength, challenges, and the potential areas for improvement within the Japanese model of the corporate governance. Let's see the application of the Japanese model of the corporate governance. They involve certain key areas. The first and the foremost, as far as the application of the Japanese model of the corporate governance is concerned, is a stakeholder focus. The traditional Japanese model has historically centered around the shareholders, such as employees, the creditors, and the local communities directly involved with the companies. However, there is a shift towards a stakeholder-focused model that redefines the purpose of the companies to include preserving the environment, addressing the inequalities, and enhancing the social inclusion. Now, this implies a broader view of stakeholders beyond the traditional boundaries, incorporating a global citizens, the natural environment, and the future generations. The next is your board structure enhancement. The evolution of the Japanese model includes the restructuring of the board compositions to strengthen the monitoring functions of the board of directors. While appointing more independent director is important, it is not one size fits all solutions. To foster the dynamism and innovation in the Japanese companies, the complementary measures like reorganizing employment systems and enhancing the policy measures such as the tax reforms are necessary addition to the board reforms. The next is your application as far as the Japanese model of corporate governance is concerned is the shareholder engagement. The Japanese corporate governance reform aims to enhance the shareholder engagement to address the issues like low return on equity, lagging the business restructuring and overly conservative management policies. Despite some progress in increasing the returns to the shareholders through the dividend and the share repurchases, there is a strong need to further strengthen the shareholder primacy to drive the technological innovation and economic dynamism with the Japanese companies. The next application is your adaptation to the global trends. The Japanese model is transforming to adapt to the global trends, moving away from the traditional focus on the stakeholders like employees towards a more inclusive approach that considers a wide range of stakeholders impacted by the corporate activities. This shift is essential to address the global challenges and ensure that the companies internalize the appropriate social values and impacts in their operations. So we can say, as far as the Japanese model of the corporate governance is concerned, the application of the Japanese model of corporate governance involves redefining the purpose of the companies, enhancing the board structures, fostering the shareholder engagement, and adapting to the global trends to drive the innovation, sustainability, and inclusivity within the Japanese corporation. The application of the Japanese model of the corporate governance involves a stakeholder-oriented system with a focus on redefining the purpose of the companies, enhancing the board structures, and fostering the shareholder engagement. So basically, these were the highlights of the Japanese model, and the new model emphasizes the addressing of the inequalities and enhancing the overall the purpose of the board, and it helps in the structured aspects of the board. And obviously, when we are appointing the independent directors, it is very crucial. It is not a standalone solution. The complementary measures like reorganization systems, etc., the shareholder engagement, and the adaptation of the global trends, so they are all a necessary part as far as the working of the Japanese model is concerned. Now, moving on to a very pertinent part, that is the Indian corporate structure model of corporate governance. The Indian model of corporate governance has evolved significantly over the years, incorporating both the traditional practices and the requirement of a rapidly growing economy. Now, it is basically shaped by a mix of the legal framework, the cultural influences, and the market dynamics. So, let's see certain features. The first and the foremost is a regulatory framework. The cornerstone of the corporate governance in India is its comprehensive regulatory framework, which includes the Companies Act 2013 and the Security and Exchange Board of India guidelines. Now, these regulations cover a wide array of the governance issues like the board composition, independent directors, audit committees, corporate social responsibility, and the disclosure requirements. The next is your SEBI, that is Security and Exchange Board of India. So, it is the primary regulatory authority for the corporate governance practices in India. It enforces the regulations and the guidelines for the listed companies to ensure the transparency, fairness, and accountability. The Companies Act 2013. Now, this particular act is a comprehensive legal framework that governs the incorporation, regulation, and the dissolution of companies in India. It includes the provisions for board composition, board meetings, the director duties, the audit committees, and the corporate social responsibilities. The next is your listing obligation and disclosure requirements, that is LODR. The SEBI's LODR regulations mandate the listed companies to adhere to the stringent disclosure and the governance standards, aiming to enhance the transparency and protect the investor interest. Now let's see some key features of the Indian model of corporate governance. The first is your board composition and independence. The Indian model emphasizes a balanced composition of the executive and the non-executive, including the independent directors. Now, this balance is very crucial for ensuring that the board can make decisions impartially and in the best interest of all the stakeholders. The next is your mandatory corporate social responsibility, that is the CSR. One of the distinct features of the Indian model is the mandatory spending on the CSR activities for the companies meeting the specified financial criteria. Now, this provision, they underline the importance of the corporate contributions to the societal developments. The next is your audit committees. The Indian governance model mandates the formation of an audit committee to oversee the company's financial reporting process, the audit of its financial statements, the appointment and the performance of the auditors, and the management of the financial risk. The next is your risk management. The companies are required to have the mechanisms for identifying and mitigating the risk, with the board of directors playing a very key role in overseeing the risk management practices. The next is your promoter influence. In many Indian companies, especially the family-owned business promoters, that is the founder or controlling the shareholders, they play a very significant role. The governance model strives to balance the promoter influence with the need for the professional management and the independent oversight, the family ownership and control. A significant portion of the Indian companies, including many large corporations, are family owned or controlled. So, this has the implications for the corporate governance, as the decision making often centers around controlling the family, leading to a blend of professional management with the family oversight. Now, while this can also ensure a long-term stability and the commitment, it may also pose certain challenges in terms of transparency and the minority shareholder rights. Next is your role of independent directors. The Indian model emphasizes the role of independent directors to ensure that the board of companies are not entirely controlled by the management or the major shareholders. The independent directors are expected to bring objectivity to the board deliberations and the safeguarding the interest of the shareholders, especially the minority ones. Now comes the CSR. The CSR introduced the mandatory spending of the companies meeting certain criteria, making India one of the first countries to legislate the CSR. The companies are required to spend a minimum percentage of their profits on the social and environmental initiatives. This reflects a broader understanding of the corporate governance that reflects the corporate responsibility towards the society. The next is your focus on the shareholder rights. The Indian corporate models have increasingly emphasized protecting and enhancing the shareholder rights. This includes the better transparency, the right to participate in the significant decisions through voting, and protecting against the unfair practices by controlling the shareholders. Next comes the audit committees and the risk management. The audit committees play a crucial role in the Indian governance model, overseeing the financial reporting, audits, and the risk management. So, this includes evaluating the independence and the performance of the external auditors and ensuring the integrity of the company's financial statement. The next is your promoter influence. In India, the term promoter refers to the individuals or the entities that have a control over the company, typically through the shareholdings. And of course, the stakeholder engagement is there, that is including the employees, customers, suppliers and community. And there's a growing emphasis on the stakeholder engagement and sustainable reporting, reflecting an inclusive approach to the corporate governance. The judiciary and the various regulatory bodies in India, they actively enforce the corporate governance norms. Thank you so much.